A trading desk inside one of Australia's biggest banks quietly lost hundreds of millions before anyone could stop it. This is the National Australia Bank Forex scandal. At the time, NAB was one of the country's most trusted financial institutions, heavily involved in global foreign exchange trading, buying and selling currencies in fast-moving international markets. Forex trading is extremely sensitive. Prices shift in seconds, and risk has to be monitored constantly. Inside that system were traders responsible for managing positions and reporting performance. At first, everything appeared normal. Trades were being executed, reports were being submitted, and the desk looked stable. But behind the scenes, something was building. Trading losses started to appear and were not properly reported. Instead, they were delayed, shifted, and hidden inside complex position structures. And in fast markets, small losses can disappear temporarily when new trades are added on top. But this didn't solve the problem. It made it worse. Each attempt to recover the losses only increased the exposure, creating a growing hidden gap inside the trading books. Eventually, risk teams and auditors began noticing unusual patterns that didn't match normal Forex behavior. When they investigated further, the scale became clear. Hundreds of millions in hidden trading losses had accumulated inside the system. National Australia Bank moved quickly to shut down positions, investigate the trading activity, and contain the damage. But by then, the losses were already real. The scandal led to resignations, regulatory scrutiny, and a complete overhaul of risk management systems inside the bank. Because in the end, the NAB Forex scandal wasn't just about bad trades. It was about how small hidden mistakes in fast markets can grow quietly until they become impossible to control. A single invention inside Qualcomm turned into a $180 million legal war. This is Qualcomm, one of the world's most powerful semiconductor companies, building the technology behind modern smartphones, wireless systems, and chip innovation used globally. Inside that system was Dr. Kareem Arabi, a senior engineer working on advanced chip research and development. In that environment, ideas move fast, but ownership moves even faster. Because in the tech industry, what matters isn't just what you build, it's who legally owns it. At first, everything appeared normal. Research was ongoing, projects were progressing, and internal development was moving through standard engineering cycles. But later, a conflict emerged over certain semiconductor innovations tied to his work. The key issue wasn't just the technology, it was timing. When exactly was the invention created? Was it during his time at Qualcomm or after? That question changed everything. Because both sides began claiming ownership of the same core ideas. After leaving the company, Arabi's side filed patents connected to chip design technology. But Qualcomm argued those ideas were already developed inside the company while he was still employed there. And that turned a technical disagreement into a full legal war. Courtrooms had to dig into engineering records, research timelines, internal documents, and patent filings to reconstruct exactly when the invention was created. It wasn't just legal arguments, it was a forensic breakdown of innovation history. And the stakes were massive. Around $180 million in value, damages, and licensing rights were tied to the disputed intellectual property. The case went through years of litigation, appeals, and expert technical analysis from both sides. Eventually, the court ruled in favor of Qualcomm, concluding that the contested technology was developed during Arabi's time at the company. After the ruling, the case became a reference point in the tech world for intellectual property disputes. Because in the end, the Dr. Kareem Arabi case wasn't just about patents. It was about how in modern technology, the difference between inspired by and owned by can be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. A single trader in Singapore brought down one of the oldest banks in the world. From the inside, this is the collapse of Barings Bank. Barings was a 200-year-old British financial institution, trusted for stability, reputation, and conservative banking practices. It had survived wars, recessions, and global financial shifts. But in the 1990s, it expanded into high-risk global trading markets. Inside its Singapore office was Nick Leeson, a trader responsible for buying and selling financial derivatives. At first, everything looked successful. His trades were generating profits, and he was trusted with more responsibility. But behind the scenes, something was going wrong. Losses began building in his trading positions. Instead of reporting them, they were hidden in internal accounts, masked as temporary issues that would later be recovered. But they weren't recovered. They kept growing. Each new trade wasn't fixing the problem, it was covering the last one, creating a hidden cycle of increasing losses. And because oversight between Singapore and London was weak, no one fully understood the scale of what was happening. Until it collapsed. By the time the losses were uncovered, they had reached over $1 billion, far beyond what the bank could absorb. Barings Bank collapsed in 1995. A 200-year-old institution was sold for just £1. And the lesson was devastating. Because in the end, Barings didn't fail because of markets. It failed because one hidden risk was allowed to grow until it became unstoppable. For a healthcare system meant to save lives was quietly losing millions through fake medical claims. This is the Health Splash $1 billion Medicare fraud case. Medicare is designed to help patients access medical care by covering treatment costs through a structured payment system. It depends heavily on one thing: trust that medical providers are billing honestly for real services. But that trust also creates vulnerability. In this case, investigators later found that some billing patterns did not fully align with actual medical services being delivered. On paper, everything looked correct. Patient visits, procedures, and treatments were all properly documented and submitted through standard healthcare billing systems. But when auditors began looking deeper, inconsistencies started to appear. Certain claims showed repeated or unusually frequent procedures. Some billing records suggested services that were difficult to independently verify, and across multiple submissions, patterns began to form that raised concern. It wasn't a single error or mistake. It was a repeated system behavior that, when viewed together, suggested something wasn't fully aligned between services provided and claims submitted. As scrutiny increased, investigators and auditors began tracing billing flows across providers, systems, and intermediaries to understand how these discrepancies were happening. What they uncovered pointed to a structured billing irregularity pattern, where claims and actual service delivery did not always match as expected, leading to questionable or inflated Medicare reimbursements. Once identified, enforcement actions followed. Claims were reviewed, billing systems were audited, and stricter verification processes were introduced across the healthcare system. But by then, significant financial losses had already accumulated, and the case became another warning inside healthcare systems. Because in the end, the Health Splash $1 billion Medicare fraud wasn't just about false claims. It was about how systems built on trust can quietly lose control when verification doesn't keep up with billing speed.